material for you all. And I'm very excited to sit down today with Tim Urban. I first came across him from a TED Talk he did on procrastination. He's got the very famous blog, Wait, But Why? And I'll let him do an introduction for himself and let you know what he's up to these days. And we'll hop into the conversation with us.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Welcome. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you're up to these days.
I started a blog called Wait But Why in 2013, and since then I've been taking on a lot of different topics, whatever kind of interests me, and I try to dig deep with the topic, and then move on to another topic. So I've been doing that for almost a decade now. The last few years has been swallowed up by a big book that I'm almost finished with, and that's kind of covers it.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, part of reading your blog over the past few years, there's this one idea that I wanted to maybe kick off the conversation around, which is this concept that you have of the Emergence Tower. Do you maybe want to tell folks a little bit about that concept, and we can kind of dive into it?
So this concept, emergence, right? It's the idea of a bunch of things combining together into something that's more than the sum of their parts. So, when that when that phenomenon like that happens, we say, it has, this combination has emergent properties. So an example would be, you have a bunch of atoms combined together into a molecule, right? And the molecule isn't just the capabilities of a bunch of atoms, but it does its own thing. It has its own properties. Bunch of molecules, right, you could say, combines together into a cell, and the cell can do all kinds of processes, and has all this kind of intelligence about it that no individual molecule has, but together it does, right? And so now, of course, a bunch of cells, a single cell organism, for a long time, billion years or so, that's all there was single cell organisms. It's actually longer than a billion years. I think it's probably more like 2 or 3 billion years. I need to brush up on that. It's long time. The Earth was populated with single cell organisms only, and at some point, evolution, took things in a different direction, where some of these single cell organisms started combining together and forming animals, right? And again, an animal is just actually a bunch of cells, bunch of molecules, and beneath that just a bunch of atoms, but it has all these properties that no cell can pull off. None of your cells has human intelligence. None of your individual neurons in your brain are smart, but together they form something that is. So this is the concept of emergence, and what I like to think about is it doesn't stop at the animal. So a wolf, right, alone is not going to be able to hunt very well. It's going to have big problems finding food and protecting itself. But when a pack of wolves can start, through pheromones and other kinds of signals, they can form kind of a super predator that can take down a much larger animal, right? And so ants, classic example, right? Each ant is stupid. The ant can't do anything. The ant colony is brilliant, right? It's kind of, so what I like to think of it is that we think of, okay, the ant is the animal, and then there's this colony, or we think of the ant as like the primary life form, and then the colony is a bunch of those. But why? That's kind of like an animal bias, like an individual animal bias, because we think of ourselves as an individual life form, and we're a single animal. But I think the ant colony is kind of the life form, right? The ant colony is kind of this really cool animal, and the ants are kind of like cells in that life form, because it functions. An ant colony functions like one single thing. That's why the individual ants will sacrifice themselves happily for the better thing, just like your cells will kill themselves off in order to help you, right? And so again, it's like the ant colony is this big selfish life form in a way, and it fights against other colonies like two animals would. So anyway, I think a lot about this, right? And then what does that mean for us, right? How does that work with humans? So I think that what's interesting about humans is that we kind of, and so the tower itself is kind of like, you go, atom, cell, atom, molecule, cell, tissue, organ, organism, and then multiple organisms, right? And each one of these, in each case, going up a floor means a bunch of those have combined together into something more than the sum of their parts. And so humans, our mindset is interesting. An ant's mindset is always like colonies is what matters. Protect the queen, defend the colony. Same with the bee, right? And I don't matter. I'm just a cell in this bigger thing. So the ant's mindset is always in the colony is where we need to is the level. The colony level is where the sacred level for the ant. Humans are weird because so polar bears aren't like this, right? You don't see a pack of male polar bears. They're solo. So their mindset's very much on the animal level, not the group of animals level, right? Well, a wolf pack is more on the group of animals level, a wolf's mindset. A human's mindset is weird because we go up and down the the elevator of Emergence Tower. So our mindset is sometimes very selfish. We evolved for individual competition. So we are greedy as individuals. We can be selfish. We will fight with other individuals. We will, so that's very polar bear-esque of us, right? That's how a polar bear is like. We're very individual mindset, but we very quickly, different setting, our minds can go to a group level. And so you look at when I go to I don't know, I'm a Boston native, so I go to a Red Sox game and walk-off win. Everyone is euphoric and yelling together, and they all look the same with their arms up in the air. Everyone's doing this weird thing with the arms up in the air. We're hugging each other. Strangers are hugging each other. What the hell is going on? It's very odd. But what's happening is this is tapping into a tribal instinct, an instinct where human mind will go to the group level and will be more like ants. We will not. The individual in that moment just isn't important. We're part of this collective thing. And so this is what, of course, tribalism is. To me, it's like, it seems like, the ant is unselfish, right? The ant will cooperate. But no, it's just that the colony is the life form. The colony is selfish, right? So the ant's just a cell. And so I think when we're in the individual level, we seem like selfish people. When you're on the tribal level, you'll seem like cooperative, right? You're in the us versus them level, and you'll sacrifice, your own needs for the us, and you're an us versus them. But actually, that the tribe itself is a little like an ant colony. The tribe itself is kind of a life form, and in that moment, because your mind is in that state, you will be individually cooperative. But the tribe itself is still a big selfish organism that hates the other tribes. The us group hates the them group, right? And so it's what I realize is that, it seems like, you have a bunch of activists with their hands in the air, and I'm like, oh yeah, they're not thinking about themselves, they're being cooperative. It's like, no, they're a cell in a big selfish giant, right? And so I think about human individuals and human giants, and you can have a giant, can be a group, a team at work of 5 people, and it can be a political protest of 1,000 people, and it can be a country of millions of people, and going off to war. And so we have all these different kinds of giants living amongst us. And sometimes our mind is, and we are, again, we're thinking about ourselves, and sometimes our mind is serving one of the many giants that we're all a part of. So whatever, maybe you identify, maybe you're patriotic, in which case your mind is sometimes a cell in a really big national giant. Maybe you're of school spirit, right? And your college, in which case you're kind of you're part of that giant, right? And so when you're on teams and whatever it is, tribes, families in their own way are kind of these, and so and it's like with emergence in each case, like a single a military of a giant army has is way more than the sum of its parts. It can do a lot more than just a bunch of individual soldiers can do. So you can apply this to how we work. If you think about a company, a company is a group of people, and the goal isn't to have, if a company has 100 people, The goal isn't for it to be 100 people's effort added together, 100 people's, the ability for the 100, take one person's thinking ability and just spread that out. Now you have 100 people doing that. What you want is it to form a group that is more than the sum of its parts. You want a good company, a good team is when they're better together than they ever could be added up individually. And a bad team is the opposite, where it's actually like, they're actually worse than they are added up individually. They're holding each other back from even just doing the work they could do individually, or they're getting in each other's way, right? So it's like, the staff number is not what matters nearly as much as the way they work together. And so if you've got, just so to say, we have 100 people, right? I talked about neurons in the brain, right? A neuron is stupid, but a bunch of neurons is an amazing magical thinking system with super intelligent properties, right? Your brain. So we think about a company as 100 brains are in a room, right? 100 brains are working together. Those are like neurons. And if they are not communicating, then they're a bunch of individual, isolated, not that smart neurons, right? The human brain is limited. So the goal is like, how can you combine those together into 100 brain system, right? That is actually, and depending on how well a company does that 100 thinking system will be different levels of intelligence. So you can have 100 brain, super brain, that is, if everything's, optimized perfectly for group collaboration, that is like a really intelligent 100, way smarter than any person, right? And that super brain gets less intelligent as the systems within the company, the communication, the culture gets less effective. So I do a lot of thinking about like what does that entail? Like so here's one obvious thing that can help group intelligence thrive as opposed to being shut down.
Sure. Great.
Yeah. So if you're the head of a company, if you're the CEO, the worst thing you can do is be really hostile towards people who disagree with you, towards subordinates who don't just say yes to everything you say and agree and nod. Because when you're like that, what happens is people want to keep their job, they want to get promoted, and they know that the way to get what they want is to say yes to you, because that's what you have made clear in your actions and in your words. And so what they're doing is they're taking their brain, all of their life experiences, their whole personality, the way they see the world, the lens, all the things they've seen at work that you've missed, right? All the things they're thinking about in the shower that morning, that relate to their work, all of those things. And they're quarantining them inside their head. Unless that's the Venn diagram between what the boss thinks, what they think. They'll talk about the stuff in the middle, right? Where it's overlap, but anything that doesn't agree, they will keep in their heads. And so what happens is what you see coming out of everyone's mouths is just whatever happens to also overlap with what the boss already thinks. So you've completely lost emergent properties there. You've completely lost emergent intelligence. You have the boss's brain on repeat all around the office. And
like an echo chamber.
An echo chamber, right? This is a political echo chamber. You've got work, business echo chambers. You've got echo chambers within a group of friends, within just a couple itself. You've got a couple, two people, and one is scared to disagree with the other. Boom, you just lost like all the magic of two brains, working together on stuff. And so at a company, the worst thing is echo chamber culture. Sorry about that. The worst thing is echo chamber culture. So you end up with you shut down all the emergent properties that can be so magical. So what's the best kind of culture? I mean, what you obviously, I think, so if you went to the full other direction, right now you've got everyone disagrees all the time, and everyone's questioning everything, and that's not good either, right? You go too far the other direction, it's just probably chaotic, and there's no, it's hard to work as a team, right? So I think to me the ideal is that it's like that first of all, just general disagreement is always encouraged. That you're never in trouble for saying, I think we're doing the wrong thing, or that the boss is wrong about something. But there's kind of like a little bit of a yin yang kind of going on, where you have maybe 4 times a year you come to the drawing board and you say, let's question everything about our strategy. Let's question everything about our culture, about our hiring policy, about the way our company's organized. Let's just, whether that's the senior team or more people. You come back and everything's up for debate. But then, you come out of that meeting or that weekend or whatever it is with, we've made some new decisions, we've made some changes, and here's what we're doing. And at that point, I do think it's good if everyone can kind of, try to execute that. You still, again, it's you never, if you get too attached to this strategy or our slogan or our 10 commandments in our company, then that becomes a new Bible there, and it's in the echo chamber again because everyone's scared to question it. So you have to be able to, nothing is sacred, but you can have a few months when you're executing, and like an ant colony, right? You get more into ant mode. The colony is trying to do something together, and then we come back and we all become individual polar bears again and say, no, let's just talk about what's going on. And then you come back together. So anyway, I could talk about this forever, as you can see.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, no, that's fascinating, and I'm really excited that we started off with that. One of the things that in reading your work on this topic in particular, and thinking about it from the context of a startup and building a company and trying to build a culture, is something that you referred to as hive switching. And I think you quoted Jonathan Haidt in his book The Righteous Mind, the idea of kind of switching from the individual to the collective, and humans' ability to kind of go between those two states of mind. So one question that I had for you was, as a founder of a company, as a CEO, how can you use that to your advantage, right? Because there are moments in time in different probably departments where you want people to kind of be selfish and individualistic and perhaps somewhat competitive with one another within your organization. Like, I think sales, for example, can be a very competitive environment. There are types of folks that tend to gravitate towards that type of work can be somewhat competitive, and you want a little bit of that ambition for yourself as the individual to go out there and make a bunch of money. But you also need people to operate, in favor of the collective. And so have you thought about or any thoughts on like how to maybe take advantage of this switch and be able to use it to help get your team to be in the right mindset at the right time?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I think the first thing is just getting these terms right in your head, even thinking about this concept, right, that we have ant on one side of the spectrum, ant colony, and then competing polar bears, male polar bears on the other side, and everywhere in between, right? And so then once that vocabulary is there, you can even start thinking about it. And I think every company is different, and I think that you see attempts at this with pay structure, right? You can, sometimes you go to a restaurant where all the tips are pooled, right? Which you could say, oh, that encourages cooperation. I'm going to pick up, oh, you're busy, I'm going to help you at your table, right? And, when a customer asks any waiter a question, no one's annoyed that it's not their table. Everyone's, because we're a team, right? So great, right? That fosters a bunch of good things. On the other hand, maybe no waiter is that incentivized to go above and beyond, because whatever, it's just going to, I'm going to be splitting this tip 15 ways either way. Whatever I do doesn't, right? So you can see the two, and pooled tips, you have more ant colony behavior, but maybe less good individual service. And then individual tips, maybe you have less cooperation, but you've got maybe people really trying to bond with their and their patrons. So at a company, I think it's that's obviously a simple version, but you see with sales, right? You see there's some kind of sometimes it's just complete competition, it's commission, more often you'll see and then sometimes you see total just group target and that's it, right? Often you'll see some combo, right, where there's a group target that everyone gets a bonus if they hit it, and then there's also individual commission or something like that, right? So this is the attempt to try to get the best of both worlds, which I think can be done. I mean, it's like it's what you want from the cooperation is you want the good parts of it, which is people will people have the other people's interests in mind. I either rooting for them, so I will go over and I'll give my time to them and I'll help But the bad, if you go too far, again, it's that no one's that individually incentivized because it's like, whatever, I'm going to make the same amount of money either way, regardless of what I do has very little effect. So you want the good part without the bad part, which is why you then also encourage kind of individual commission or something like that. And so that, you can, everyone does better if everyone does better. But if you really want to crush it, you want to really get out there. And so now when people are specifically and potentially stealing clients from each other, sometimes you're going to have to make if there's a limited pool of business, you just have to decide. It's experimentation, right? There's utility in ant colony, there's utility in polar bear, and then is there some kind of golden place in the middle? Is there some kind of and what are the pros and cons? So you just every business owner has a better sense than I ever will about their business and the psychology. But just thinking about this and getting this kind of this spectrum into your head can help you kind of see what's going on and make good decisions based on that.
Yeah, no, that's a really good way to think about it. And yeah, I think compensation is definitely one of the levers, entrepreneurs or founders or folks in companies can pull to toggle between the two types of mentalities for sure.
You also see a lot of companies just, in general, what can never hurt is just team spirit stuff. If people who work at your company are kind of almost if it's like a little bit of a cult, and everyone who works there kind of like is kind of obsessed with the brand and loves each other. And there's this, first of all, when a new employee comes in, if there's a really strong, positive, loyal kind of team culture there, that's really strong. You come in and it's like a hurricane. You're not going to be able to resist that. Like you're going to have to either get in or get out, right? And like it's big. It's bigger than any one person, so it takes on a life of its own. If you don't have a strong culture, one negative person, can start doing a lot of damage. Just talking shit behind the boss's back and starting to kind of, just be negative. It spreads as well. So really, and that negativity is a great way to kill all the ant colony benefits, right? And a lot of the emergent properties go away. And of course, you're also going to have more turnover. So to try to create not just a culture that is ant colony-esque, is kind of like this company, the mission's bigger than any one of us. Just general good team stuff, the stuff that, you'll hear pro athletes always, the language they use after every game, they always say, they never take credit themselves. They say it's all these guys are out there, blah, blah, blah. You want that, but also if it can be strong enough, it also overpowers all like other kind of energies, negative energy, selfish energy, really kind of, and it can become, it's a little like the high switch. It's like that alone can kind of get the high. So you walk into that office and you just feel the high switch kind of turn on in your head, which is great for the business. It's amazing for the business and great for the employees. It's way more inspiring and fun to go to work when you feel that way.
So that's a really great segue to the next thing that I wanted to chat about a little bit, which was like the idea of tribes and like different tribes, even within the workplace, right? I think you have an example of some old proverb about brothers and cousins and strangers, right? Brothers fight, but then brothers will team up to fight their cousins, and then cousins and brothers will team up to fight strangers. So, there's obviously a lot of polarization right now in society in general. A lot of that's political polarization, I'd say, and that manifests in the workplace sometimes, right? You've got different tribes and different ways of thinking, and there can be internal struggles in companies around this tribalism that's happening within your company, but it's about other things like macro, not about your company necessarily, but different tribes politically within your company, different ways of thinking about the world, different ways of thinking about social issues, and how a company should perhaps participate or not participate, or show up or not show up. And so I was curious if you had any thoughts around there being potentially like a way to think about like a hierarchy of tribes, or when is your political tribe gonna make you leave your job potentially because you don't see eye to eye, or when is your tribe of your company gonna make you kind of put your personal thoughts and just bottle it in and just go to work anyways? Like, how do you see people navigating this like hierarchy of different tribes they belong to?
Yeah, that's a hard one. I mean, I was so again, to bring back my Red Sox fandom for a second, I like to go on the subreddit and just see what people are saying after a big playoff game or whatever. There's a big, bunch of baseball nerds there talking about, and the mentality there is like, obviously everyone there is like tribally aligned. It's like Red Sox good, Yankees bad, right? Whoever we're playing bad. Like umps if they screwed us bad, you know, and and if there
Yeah.
is like a negativity about the Red Sox, it's like self-reflection, but we're all together. Maybe we're frustrated with the team, but like all of us as fans are like, we're obviously all in the same boat. And we're like, there's like, you can just feel this kind of tribal mentality. And I remember reading one when someone said, it was like right in the heat of one of our like, you know, America's idiot political, like, you know, debacles that we've been having. And someone said something about how it's like, yeah, America, you know, like the Red Sox is like, I forget, I don't even remember which side it was. It was like, these are like, you know, the Red Sox, or like, you know, the Yankees are like MAGA, or like the Yankees are like the left, you know, like the woke left or something, you know, something. And it was so awkward. Suddenly it was like, people were like, that's not cool, dude. Like, blah, blah, blah. Like, and you saw like for the first time, like strife. And it was like so funny because you just saw everyone was in this one mindset where it didn't matter your politics, right? It didn't matter, you know, your country you're from. It doesn't matter your politics. It doesn't matter what you do. Because we're in Red Sox land now, we're all brothers, right?
Right.
As soon as someone said that, it like popped that bubble, and suddenly it was like, wait a second. And it was almost a reminder. Wait, I might hate some of you, right? Like it's like, and it's like the concept in the baseball context. It's like, obviously I love all of you and I hate all the Yankee fans. As soon as you like bring politics in, if for, you know, some people don't care about politics. Some people who are very tribal about politics, if they're more tribal about politics, suddenly it's like you find yourself like, oh, I prefer, if you find out the Yankee fans are more politically aligned with you, it would suddenly you'd be like, oh, you know, I don't even know about you guys. Like, honestly, the Yankee fans are better, you know, and it just would mess everything up, right? Because it's one groove you're going in. And so anyway, I thought that was funny. And it was just such a funny moment of watching like this this other tribalism, like invade a space that's supposed to have only one kind of tribalism. So you see this going on at companies in the last few years, especially. Political tribalism has become such a all encompassing, all permeating like concept in the US. It's become, not for everyone. If you actually look at surveys, most people are still not that political, but for certain groups of people, it's become everything. It's become like ethnic, tribalism. It's become like, hardcore religious tribalism. And that has one of the things that's happened is it's come to the workplace, and it's come into a lot of things. You see it in the NBA. You see, it's political tribalism has kind of like invaded all kinds of other spaces, and usually there's some other tribal game going on there, right? With sports, you have this team and that team, and so when politics comes in, it like kind of shatters that bubble of like that world, and it can happen with companies too. Politics can come in. And sometimes, suddenly, the people on your, business team that don't agree with your politics, you suddenly feel like they're your enemy, right? And suddenly, well, that totally pops the bubble of like team spirit, right? We're all in the same thing. So you saw some companies, in the, I think 2021, you saw Toby Lucky at Shopify write a letter about how we don't do politics here. And we're not a family, we're a team. And that was his way of, I think, saying, well, when you come into office, we are in Shopify zone. That's who we are. We are Shopify employees. We are a Shopify team. And other things can happen. You can have those things, that's not going to be the centerpiece. That's not going to override the world that we have here, which is a business world. And and so you saw this at some companies with the CEO stood up. More often the CEO was scared to do this, and so you ended up absolutely. And sometimes the CEO did say something, and you had an exodus of people for whom they said political tribalism is so strong in my heart that I will not be at a company that is not political first and business second, basically. If they're saying politics is a distraction, I don't want to work there anymore, which is their right. They can go to a company where the business mission and the political mission are either intertwined, or where the political mission of the people there is a huge part of what they do. So I think actually CEOs that don't want their company to be a mixture of political tribalism and company tribalism should make a statement. And that's a great way to weed out everyone who has a different mindset, who says politics belongs at work and the people who say politics doesn't belong will stay. And people, so I think, obviously it's easy for me to say. I'm not, sitting there having to worry about a third of my workforce leaving. I mean, it's obviously that can be a disaster, but I think in the long run, it's worth it because, you take the hit once and then you just lay down the law, and all new employees realize, again, it's not that politics is not able to be discussed or anything, but the idea that the company would have to make a statement that aligns with a certain group of people at the company, the public, it's just like, I don't think any CEO should have to do that. It's not your telos, right? This is another John Haidt concept. He says, the telos of a knife is to cut, right? The telos of a glass is to hold liquid, right? I mean, it's just like, what is the core purpose? And you can say the telos of our company is to do whatever this mission is. And what a lot of the political people want to do at their companies is say, actually, that comes second. The first telos is, we have to do is an organ of political activism, and that if the two conflict, the political activism is going to win. That's how you know what the sacred mission is. And then beyond that, we can get back to what we do, but we're gonna, and I think that no CEO should feel bad in saying, I'm sympathetic to your cause, and I think it's important, but it's not what we do here.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point of view and great perspective. And yeah, it's mixed, the responses to CEOs who have kind of been clear and have taken the stand. And you've seen rumblings of this, I think, over at Netflix when Dave Chappelle was getting a lot of grief, and they're like, we're not going to pull it, like it's entertainment and it's aligned with Netflix and what we're trying to do here. So you do see a little bit of that happening out there. And yeah, I guess from a hierarchy standpoint, if your political tribe is above your work tribe, then you'll act accordingly to that. One of the other concepts that you've touched on, and I think would be useful in the context of companies and cultures and what have you for the audience, was this idea of like idea labs versus echo chambers. And I think we kind of started talking about that a little bit, but maybe you want to talk about your perspective on the two, and we can maybe start there.
Yeah. So we all know what an echo chamber is, right? An echo, but I was like, what's the opposite of an echo chamber, right? I mean, echo chambers we don't want to be an echo chamber. So what do we want to be in? And so the term that I thought best represented what it is an idea lab, right? It's an idea lab. And the reason I call it that is, to me, these aren't places. Idea lab, echo chamber, they're metaphorical places. What they really are is they're intellectual cultures. And I think it's, again, just like this idea of emergence, ants to polar bears. And once you get that spectrum in your head, you can start to see where things are on it, and you can start to adjust the settings of commission to move people. It helps to have that. I think this is another one. I think that you have on one side of a spectrum, you've got pure echo chamber culture, right? So this might be a hardcore dictatorship who, if a journalist writes the wrong thing, then they're going to be executed, and so that, North Korea, right? Publicly, everyone is going to be saying exactly the same thing. They're all going to be falling in line with the sacred doctrine, whether that doctrine is religious or political or anything else. And again, that means everyone's actual brain is quarantined in their head, right? They're all just saying what they're supposed to. No one knows what anyone else is actually thinking. And eventually, that starts to affect people's thinking. Right now, people start to all think the same way again. So you lose all these great things about being an individual, and also all these great group properties. You get the worst of all worlds, unless you're the dictator. In which case, having an echo chamber beneath you, if you can overpower, if you don't need to be smart, right? You don't need collective intelligence. You just need might. Then it can be a great way to have a fierce army, and no one's going to try to overthrow you or whatever. But in today's world, usually you want something different from your team. You want it to be smart. You want to actually have it think, not just fight. But by the way, this is why we're all prone to be in echo chambers. That our mindset goes there. We group can get echo. Even a very smart group of people who they're very smart, and they even like to disagree. They can, on certain topics, they can start to obviously we're the people who are like this, and we hate those people. Talk shit about those kind of people. It becomes hard suddenly to say, actually, I think there are those kind of people might be right about this. It becomes kind of awkward. The group has become echo chambery, right? It's such a natural instinct of human groups, because we evolved at a time when, you know, small tribes, like, it's actually good for survival if everyone agrees and everyone's on the same page and everyone fits in, everyone follows the chief. Now you go to the other side of the spectrum and you have a bunch of stuff that's not that natural to us. We have to override our nature, but it's hugely productive. So on the pure idea lab is a place where no idea is sacred, nothing. And an idea is treated like a science experiment. So you put a science experiment, you know, picture a bunch of scientists in a lab trying to cure cancer, and they're doing experiments. So I do an experiment, and I'm showing, you know, people what I'm doing, the other technicians, and they would say, I think something. Okay, wait. I think one of the things you put in is messing up the results. I'm not going to say, you know, you're an asshole. Why would you say? Right? No, what? I'm not going to say, look, we can't be friends anymore. Like, you can't. Let's fire them. What? That would make no sense. I'd say, wait, what? Let me see. Maybe I don't agree. But I'd say, no, I don't think you're right about that, because I tried that, and I think it's actually, you know, if anything, it's this variable that needs to be changed. And he said, no. We'd say, well, let's figure it out. Let's get in. You know, let's do one of each, right? And so an idea lab treats ideas like that. I throw out my political view. I say, America should stop supporting Ukraine. Okay. Sometimes I'll just throw it out, you know, an idea lab. I don't even have to really believe that. I'll throw it out for fun, just to argue, right? Or I'll play devil's advocate. Everyone's saying pro Ukraine. It's annoying me, so I'm just gonna be anti-Ukraine and see what, anti-US supporting Ukraine, and just to mess around, because it's fun, because we'll learn something. You know, it's like, let me bring a fake anti-Ukraine person into the room in the form of me playing devil's advocate, so we can like test the idea. Let's see how strong it is, if we all agree, right? So people treat it like experiments. They mess around, they kick each other's ideas. They stand around beating up on one idea. They'll kick their own ideas, all in the service of, sorry, one second. Yeah. All in the service of getting to the truth. The telos of the idea lab is, let's figure out what's true, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you're trying to cure cancer, right? No one's like, oh, you hurt my feelings about it. No one cares. It's like, is this help us cure cancer or not? Like, there's obviously a very clear North Star. And so in an idea lab, the North Star is truth. Let's figure out what's true. Let's just argue, let's debate, let's disagree. Let's call each other on bias. Let's call each other on hypocrisy. Let's call each other on straw manning, on confirmation bias, you know, and so that what happens is two great things. Every individual ends up smarter and more self-aware, because they're called on their bullshit, because we all do it. We all have confirmation bias. We all make bad arguments. We all straw man. And when you have people that are going to call you on that, it's like boot camp. It doesn't feel good always to be there, but man, you end up a good thinker and a good debater. You end up with clear ideas in your head. You end up being able to argue the shit out of people in the real world, and it just makes you smarter in general. You know, it's intellectual boot camp, just being around your friends, right? If that's recreation. Second good thing is that the group gets smarter, right? It's like, if one person in the group, whether it's a company or, again, a group of friends, one person in the group figures out a flaw in an argument everyone else believes, that quickly spreads, and everyone, you know, updates, and the whole group gets smarter. So now you've got, you know, just say there's 10 people, you know, you have 10 times the many errors being caught, right? And one person finds out an interesting truth. Now everyone knows it. It spreads to the whole system. It's like, you know, that the brains are synced. And so the group itself discovers way more than any of the individuals could if they were alone, okay? Because all the biases cancel out, and people, so it's like a team. It's like a team that tries to root out bias together. It's a truth-finding team. So, you know, you might sound like, oh, if your friends are like that doesn't sound very fun. You're all like, but it's just a culture, you know. So you might have a group of friends, and it's just kind of fun to argue, and no one really, you know, takes it personally when people disagree with them. And that is so again, it's a spectrum, right? You're going to have, even if you move down the spectrum a little, it's pretty idea labby, but there's certain things that, and this group gets a little echo chambery about this topic and maybe this topic, or, you know, we're open for most ideas, but actually there's a few taboo topics that, like, if you say that here, you're going to get a bad, and people are going to not respect you, or not like, okay, so it's a little bit less idea labby. And maybe that's no okay place to be too. I think most groups realistically probably are like that. Problem is, so and you're accepting something. If you say, these topics are taboo, maybe that's for good reason, right? Maybe they hurt people's feelings or something. But you are accepting that we're not going to have much intellectual growth on those topics. The taboo is kind of a ceiling on intellectual growth. But now you move down the spectrum and things start to get to a place where disagreeing in general is not cool. And sometimes as someone who likes to disagree, I'll run into a new person, and I'll disagree with their idea. And I find that they think we got in a fight. They think I was being rude. They think I'm an asshole because they're from the culture they're used to. Disagreeing is something an asshole does, especially just straight out doing it, not dressing it up in a bunch of, well, that totally makes sense. Have you thought about, but I'll just say, well, I don't know, because I see. So, it's just interesting. Once you start seeing this, you start seeing it everywhere. And again, I think at work, you really want it to be ideal, Abby. And that starts with the leader, the leadership. If everyone can disagree with the leadership, then that's a great start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, on that idea of creating an idea lab within your company, it's interesting because I think, and I'm making an assumption here just based on people I've spoken with, that universities and colleges, I think, used to perhaps prepare people to go into an idea lab type environment, whereas more and more they're starting to become a bit of echo chambers, and perhaps people aren't as prepared to participate in an idea lab when they enter the workforce. So it's almost as if that responsibility is now being put more and more on companies to create that culture, as opposed to having people who perhaps came through school and had their ideas challenged a lot and were able to kind of bring that with them into the workforce. So is there anything?
Yeah, it's a muscle. It's like, sorry, what were you going to say?
No. Like, any advice for trying to foster this environment, in particular, if you do have a younger workforce that might not be that prepared to have their ideas challenged, because they might be coming in from a bit of an echo chamber-y type environment.
Yeah. I think, this drives me insane about, colleges, K through 12. The telos of these places is supposed to be two things, one, education, teaching people, but it's supposed to be teaching people how to think much more than teaching people what to think. And the other telos is, for college, is truth discovery, like research. So in politics, again, when a certain political tribes, telos, in this case, usually very much on the left, starts to be able to bully the other telos and say, well, when truth or education conflicts with what we want to, what we want to do, which is activist building, train activists and teach, then we're going to win out, so and so I think, that what that does is, regardless of, it's the stuff that you could be learning that you're not, but it also just trains kids to not just think echo chambers are the right kind of culture, but it trains them to enforce echo chambers on others. It trains them that when someone else is disagreeing with your political ideas, the right thing to do is to actually try to get them out of the group, whether that's ostracizing them socially or trying to get a professor fired or trying to get someone canceled out in the world, right? It's this concept that disagreement warrants punishment, which is exactly, how do social echo chambers form? You get a really negative reaction from everyone for disagreeing with like a sacred dogma, and that is a punishment. And so people react, incentivized now to agree. And so then everyone agrees, right? So a lot of young people have been very much trained by authorities to be in echo chambers, to seek them out, and to enforce them on others, which is awful, right? And I think that's like, some of these also can be sensationalized. And I think a lot of schools are just fine. I think there's a lot of students in a lot of schools that are doing great in their idea labs, but I do think it's on the rise. This notion, or you could say it's on the decline. The concept of students going to college to learn how to think, college should be intellectual boot camp. That may be on the decline. So now they get to companies, like you said, and these younger employees might go to the company having been now trained for maybe 15 straight years that A, politics should enter every single place, and B, when people disagree with my politics, I should be trying to get them fired. We should be trying to use power that we have to enforce intellectual conformity, whether it's politics or maybe that just culture travels over to people disagreeing with your strategy idea at work. It's now that person was an asshole to me in that meeting. You weren't an asshole they were. I can't work with them anymore, or they're below me. I'm going to fire them because they're just no one can work with them. They're so difficult. And a lot of times what that actually means is that they openly disagree in a culture that is not strictly kind of supporting open disagreement. And so what you're doing is you're driving out the individual thinkers, the brave people, and you end up really with an echo chamber. So what can they do? I think first of all, I don't think many of these young people, they're not bad people. They're not stupid people. They often they've been trained this way and they haven't thought that hard about it. And so I think one thing that can happen is just from the beginning, having like a set of kind of sacred tenets of the office, right? And one of them can be like disagreement is good, right? For example, or no idea is sacred. And then explaining the reasoning behind it, talking about collective intelligence, talking about brains being quarantined if everyone's afraid to speak, talking about and I think most people, when they hear it that way and they understand the reasoning behind it, it's not just people want to be. It's not equivalent to the commandment being we're all going to be assholes to each other here because that's good for some reason. No, it's specifically that like ideas shouldn't be sacred. And disrespecting someone's intellectual science experiment is not disrespecting them. And we don't take disagreement personally here. And so I think a strong culture and in training, explaining the reasoning behind that strong culture can go a long way. Now, if an employee still hears that and still is getting offended by disagreement and is still trying to punish people, that employee needs to go. Like they need to go and grow up and then work. They're not a team player. They're not meant to be on a team right now, unless it's look, they can go be a missionary. They can go be a political activist. And there are certain teams you can be on where the entire anchor of the team is intellectual agreement or religious agreement or whatever. Like that's the starting place. We all agree. Now we can go do our work. Great, go be on one of those teams. But like a business team trying to do outcompete things and innovate, they just have they're not ready for that, or they're not the right match for it. So companies have to rigorously enforce this because again, the gravity is always pulling us towards real echo chamber kind of vibe.
No, that's great advice. I want to be respectful of time. Thank you so much for this conversation. If nothing else, I hope that our audience walks away with maybe perhaps some new vocabulary to use to think through these sticky issues and do some thinking, and hopefully have some more things that they have up their sleeve to help improve culture and craft the culture that they want in order to kind of build great businesses. So thank you again for your time. Where can folks find you online? You mentioned you got a book that you're working through. When's that coming out? Maybe get a little bit of a plug here for you.
Yeah, the book is going to be coming out in the early 23, and you can find me and everything I do online at waitbutwhy.com. And my email list is the best way to know when something new goes up.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Thank you very much. I hope you all enjoyed this conversation.